There's a reason some rooms go quiet when you walk in. It isn't your face, it isn't your clothes, it's the signal you carry, the silent weight of someone who won't kneel to noise. Watch closely. The people who bristle at you aren't reacting to you. They're reacting to what your presence exposes in them. If you've ever felt that cold shift, the side glance, the delayed smile, the sudden critique dressed up as advice, understand this: you didn't cause it, you only revealed it. Why does this happen? Why do people who've never truly known you secretly despise you? It's not always about what you've done, it's often about what you represent. And as we unravel these reasons, you'll see that their resentment often says more about them than it ever does about you. One rule while you listen: don't argue with any of this in your head. Just watch where it lands in your body. If a sentence stings, it's touching something real. If a line calms you, it's reminding you who you are. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Your confidence exposes their insecurity. There's something magnetic about a person who walks into a room with quiet certainty. Not arrogance, not boastfulness, but the kind of calm presence that doesn't need validation. This is true confidence, measured steady, unshaken by outside noise. But here's the paradox: the very thing that makes you admirable is the same thing that makes others bristle with resentment. Your confidence doesn't just fill the room, it exposes the insecurities in those around you. It's like holding up a mirror that forces them to see what they lack: courage, discipline, or self-belief. Think about it. When you stand tall, you remind the insecure of how small they feel inside. When you speak with clarity, you remind them of their own hesitations. When you act without second-guessing yourself, they see the weight of their own doubts. And instead of confronting those weaknesses, it's easier for them to project their discomfort onto you. This is why confidence often attracts silent enemies. It's not that you've done something wrong, it's that your presence unsettles the fragile balance they've built for themselves. To them, your certainty is a threat because it highlights their lack of it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." Their opinions are shadows cast by their own fears. So when you feel the sting of hidden resentment, remind yourself of this truth: your confidence is not the problem. Confidence is not about being louder than others. It's about being yourself. And those who resent you for it are not your enemies. They are lost souls, still searching for the courage that you've already found. True confidence is not loud. It is quiet. It is not the man who needs to dominate every conversation, but the man who listens without fear. It is not the one who boasts of his victories, but the one who can carry defeat with grace. That kind of confidence is rare, and because it is rare, it unsettles those who rely on bravado to mask their fragility. They may laugh at you, dismiss you, or call you too serious. Yet beneath the surface, what they really feel is threatened. It proves that real power does not come from pretending, but from being rooted in something deeper: principle, discipline, and self-respect. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." Confidence is born of exactly that: living by standards you've set for yourself, not ones borrowed from the crowd. And when people see you grounded in something unshakable, they feel their own ground begin to tremble. This is why your confidence doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to prove anything. Its very existence is proof. And for the insecure, that proof cuts deep because it reveals what they refuse to admit: that the only thing standing in their way is themselves. Chapter 2. You refuse to conform. From the moment we're born, society hands us invisible scripts. Dress this way, speak this way, think this way. Smile when you're supposed to smile. Stay quiet when the truth makes others uncomfortable. Most people follow these unwritten rules without ever questioning them. They fold themselves neatly into the boxes life presents them, hoping that by blending in and accepted, protected, or even admired. But when you choose a different path, when you step outside of those boundaries, you become a living rebellion. Refusal to conform makes people uneasy. Why is this? Because your independence highlights their dependence. Your courage to live on your own terms exposes their willingness to compromise just to fit in. They don't dislike you because of who you are. They dislike you because you've dared to be what they're too afraid to become. Think of history's great thinkers and leaders: Socrates, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. None of them bent entirely to the crowd's demands. Socrates questioned the very foundation of Athenian society and was sentenced to death for it. Marcus Aurelius ruled the greatest empire on earth, yet still kept journals reminding himself not to live for applause, but for virtue. They understood a timeless truth. The crowd can be loud, but it is rarely wise. When you refuse to conform, people will whisper. They'll say you're strange, difficult, arrogant, or even dangerous. But beneath their words lies envy, because deep down they wish they had the same courage to break free. Conformity is comfortable, but it kills the spirit. Nonconformity is uncomfortable, but it breathes life into the soul. Stoic philosophy reminds us that true strength lies in living in harmony with reason and principle, not with the fleeting approval of the masses. As Epictetus put it, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. This is the price of authenticity, to walk a path that others will never understand. So when you notice hostility from those who cling to the herd, remember this: their discomfort is proof that you are awake in a world half asleep. You've refused the easy prison of conformity, and that freedom will always unsettle those who've chosen chains. Refusing to conform doesn't just unsettle individuals, it destabilizes entire systems. Workplaces, social groups, even families often depend on unspoken agreements, on everyone silently agreeing to maintain the same illusions. When you refuse to play along, you break the illusion. Suddenly, your honesty makes their small lies obvious. Your discipline makes their excuses transparent. Your courage makes their timidity impossible to deny. And because most people fear being exposed, they turn their discomfort into resentment. They may mock you, ostracize you, or label you as rebellious. But what they are truly saying is, your freedom reminds me of my chains. The Stoics taught that virtue cannot be compromised by the crowd. You must be willing to endure misunderstanding, ridicule, even isolation, if it means living true to yourself. And that is what frightens others, that you are willing to pay the price for authenticity, while they are not. So when resentment comes, wear it like a crown. For it means you are living as few dare to live, outside the cage of conformity, in alignment with your own reason, with your own soul. Chapter 3. Your success magnifies their failures. Success is never just about the goals you achieve. It's about the silent comparisons it awakens in the minds of others. When you rise, when you accomplish something meaningful, your very existence becomes a mirror that reflects back the things others have avoided. Every step forward you take reminds some people of how long they've been standing still. Every victory whispers to them that they too had opportunities, but chose excuses instead of effort. And rather than using your progress as inspiration, they twist it into resentment. Here's the truth few want to admit. Success doesn't create envy, it reveals it. It pulls it out of hiding, dragging to the surface the insecurities people have buried. Your discipline highlights their procrastination. Your courage exposes their fear. Your perseverance mocks their endless distractions. And so they despise you, not because of your achievements, but because your life reminds them of what they could have been if they had chosen differently. In their mind, your presence becomes an accusation, even if you never utter a word. Seneca understood this poison well. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Envy is poverty of the soul. The envious look at someone else's harvest while ignoring the barren field they never bothered to cultivate. Think about it. When you wake up early to build something of value, when you practice self-discipline while others chase comfort, the results eventually show. And when they do, some will celebrate you, but many will quietly seethe. Because your very success dismantles the fragile excuses they've built to justify their own lack of progress. But here's where Stoicism sharpens our perspective. You cannot control the envy of others, nor should you allow it to disturb your peace. Epictetus would remind us that what others feel is outside our control. What matters is that you continue to live with virtue, with discipline, and with purpose. So, when you feel the sting of hidden resentment, don't shrink yourself. Don't dull your light to make others comfortable in their darkness. Understand this: their hatred is not about your victories, it is about their failures. And in that truth lies your freedom. Chapter 4. Your kindness unmasks their bitterness. Kindness is often spoken of as if it's universally admired, but in reality, it unsettles more people than you might imagine. When you show genuine kindness, when you give without hidden motives, when you speak gently where others would lash out, it creates a sharp contrast against those who live with bitterness in their hearts. For them, your kindness is not comforting, it's confronting. It forces them to recognize how hardened they've become, how closed off their spirit now is. Your compassion reminds them of a part of themselves they abandoned long ago, and instead of softening, they respond with suspicion. They whisper, "Why is he so kind? What does she really want?" Nobody is that genuine. Their bitterness builds narratives around your actions, because they cannot comprehend that someone can give without expecting anything in return. In a world where so many relationships are transactional, authentic kindness feels like a foreign language. But here's the irony. What they often despise in you is the very thing they secretly crave. Your warmth exposes the coldness they carry. Your patience reveals their irritability. Your generosity unmasks their selfishness. Your goodness doesn't inspire them, it accuses them. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." This is the Stoics' answer. Do not let the suspicion of others change your character. To remain kind in a bitter world is not weakness, it is strength beyond measure. And make no mistake, kindness is not naivety. The Stoics were never advocates of blind trust. They understood that not everyone deserves access to your inner circle. Kindness is not about lowering your guard. It's about refusing to let the world's cruelty harden you. So when your kindness is met with coldness, remember, the hostility is not about you. It is the bitterness of others being reflected back at themselves. They are unsettled because you carry a light they have long since lost. To walk the Stoic path is to continue to be that light, not for applause, not for recognition, but because it is the truest expression of who you are. And those who resent you for it only confirm how desperately the world still needs it. The ability to see through others is not about suspicion or paranoia, it's about awareness. It's about refusing to be lulled to sleep by pretty words and false gestures. When you cultivate this awareness, people sense it. They feel exposed around you, as if every lie they tell will shatter the moment it leaves their lips. And that makes them uneasy. Some will avoid you altogether, because your very presence feels like a threat to the persona they've built. Others will resent you, because your perception makes them feel powerless. A mask only works when people agree to believe it, and you refuse to play that game. The Stoics trained themselves for exactly this clarity. They believed the world is full of appearances, distractions and disguises, and that wisdom lies in cutting through them. Reality is often hidden, and only the disciplined mind can separate truth from illusion. And here is the heart of it. Seeing through masks requires courage, because once you see the truth, you can no longer live in the comfort of lies. You cannot unsee false friends, hidden envy, or quiet betrayals, and this clarity can feel isolating, but it is also freedom, because when you know what is real, you cannot be deceived. When you recognize masks for what they are, you step out of the play others are performing and live in the truth. And though people may resent you for it, your perception is not a curse. It is a shield that guards you from deception, from betrayal, from the false promises that ensnare so many others. So yes, they may fear you for your insight. They may whisper behind your back, avoid your gaze, or try to discredit you. But remember this: their resentment is simply proof that your vision is clear, and their mask has already begun to crack. Chapter 5. You represent change. They fear change is one of life's few guarantees, yet it is also one of the things people resist most fiercely. Human beings cling to the familiar, even when it hurts them, because the unknown feels terrifying. So when you begin to grow, when you evolve into a stronger, wiser, more disciplined version of yourself, you become a living reminder that change is not only possible, but necessary. And here's the problem: your growth exposes their stagnation. When you choose discipline over indulgence, your very presence challenges the excuses they've repeated for years. When you raise your standards, you remind them of the standards they've quietly lowered. You don't need to say a word. Your life itself delivers the message. It could be different. This is why some people secretly resent you when you improve yourself. They are not angry at your progress. They are terrified by what it means for their own lives. If you can change, it proves they could too. But admitting that would shatter the comfortable illusion they've built around themselves, the illusion that says, "This is just the way I am." The Stoics understood this resistance well. Heraclitus famously said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." Life itself is a current, always moving, always reshaping us. To resist change is to fight against the very flow of nature. And yet, many do exactly that. They cling to old habits, old identities, old wounds, because change demands responsibility. It demands courage, and courage is rare. So when you embrace transformation, when you rise from your past, when you rebuild yourself, it rattles those around you. They fear your evolution because it dismantles their excuses. It threatens the fragile comfort of their sameness. And rather than rise with you, they find it easier to resent you. But here is where Stoic philosophy gives us clarity. Their fear is not your burden. You are not responsible for protecting others from the discomfort of witnessing your growth. You are responsible only for continuing to live in alignment with reason, with discipline, and with truth. If your change unsettles others, let it. If your evolution stirs resentment, so be it. For the only alternative is to remain stagnant, to betray your own potential for the sake of someone else's comfort. And that is the one thing the Stoics would never advise. Embrace the role you play. Be the living proof that transformation is possible. Be the reminder that change is the law of life. And understand this: if others fear you for it, it is only because you have already begun walking a path they are too afraid to even face. But here's another layer people often miss. Your change doesn't just unsettle individuals. It can disrupt entire groups, families, circles of friends, Even workplaces operate on unspoken agreements, often built on shared weaknesses. Maybe it's the nightly drinking ritual. Maybe it's the gossip that bonds the group. Maybe it's the culture of settling, where no one reaches higher because it keeps everyone comfortable. The moment you rise above those patterns, you disturb the balance. Suddenly, your refusal to participate shines a light on the unhealthy dynamic they all silently agreed to maintain. Your growth becomes dangerous, not because it harms them, but because it forces them to face the truth they've been hiding from. And this is why growth often feels lonely. When you climb, you may find yourself leaving behind people who once felt close. But understand this, you are not betraying them. You are simply refusing to betray yourself. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you, not those who hold you in place, not those who fear your progress, but those who welcome it and rise with you." So if your growth costs you a few relationships, see it for what it is: a clearing, a space being made for stronger bonds, deeper connections, and allies who will not be threatened by your evolution, but strengthened by it. And in the end, that is the highest proof of growth. Not just that you've changed, but that your life begins to attract those who refuse to fear change at all. So if your growth costs you a few relationships, see it for what it is: a clearing, a space being made for stronger bonds, deeper connections, and allies who will not be threatened by your evolution, but strengthened by it. And remember, resentment toward your growth can also be a hidden compliment. People rarely resent what doesn't matter. No one feels threatened by stagnation, by mediocrity, by sameness. They feel threatened only when someone steps forward, when someone begins to break free. So the very fact that they resist your change is proof of its impact. It means you are no longer invisible. It means you have shifted the ground beneath them simply by living differently. And this is the paradox. The more you grow, the more some will fight to keep you the same. But the Stoic path demands you let go of their fear and hold fast to your own direction. For growth is not about leaving others behind. It is about refusing to leave yourself behind. Chapter 6. You cannot be manipulated. One of the greatest sources of resentment comes from people who fail to control you. Manipulators thrive on weakness, on finding cracks in your armor where they can slip in their hooks. They live for emotional buttons they can press, the insecurities they can exploit, and the doubts they can amplify. But when you build yourself on the foundation of self-awareness and inner discipline, those buttons no longer exist. You become a fortress, not cold, not detached, but unshakable. This truth is poison to manipulators because their power only exists in the minds of others. Once you realize that their words, their tactics, their little games only have power if you grant it to them, the entire illusion shatters. This is why some people despise you. They cannot manipulate you into guilt, submission, or control your emotions. To them, this feels like an unbearable loss of power. When you refuse to react, when you stand calm in the face of their provocation, you dismantle their strategy entirely. A manipulator without control is like a hunter with no prey, useless, frustrated, and exposed. Manipulators are not always obvious. They do not always show their hand openly. In fact, the most skilled among them come disguised as friends, mentors, even lovers. They wear masks of care, masks of wisdom, masks of intimacy. Yet underneath it all, their motive is the same: control. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People hate what they cannot control. When they realize you cannot be bent, when they see that their guilt trips bounce off of you, when their silent treatments fail to make you beg, resentment is born. They will call you cold, selfish, and arrogant. But what they are truly saying is, You no longer dance when I pull the strings. The Stoics prepared us for this. Epictetus taught that no man is free who is enslaved to the opinions of others. If your peace depends on someone's approval, then you're already in their prison. But when you free yourself from that need, you step beyond their reach entirely. This kind of freedom can be lonely at first, because many relationships, sadly, are built not on respect, but on subtle manipulation. The moment you break that dynamic, those relationships may collapse. But let them. For what you lose in false connections, you gain in authenticity. Imagine this. The same silence they once used to punish you now becomes your sanctuary. The same criticism that once stung now becomes meaningless noise. The same attempts to control you now serve only to highlight how powerless they truly are. This is not arrogance, it is sovereignty. It is the quiet power of a person who has built their life on principles instead of approval. And in the end, that is why you cannot be manipulated, because your worth is no longer negotiable. It is not up for debate. It does not swing with someone's praise or crumble with their disapproval. It is rooted in something unshakable, yourself. So remember this: the next time someone's resentment burns against you, it may not be because of what you've done wrong. It may be because you've finally removed their last thread of control. And nothing terrifies a manipulator more than losing their grip on someone who has decided to live free. Chapter 7. Your silence speaks loud. Most people believe power comes from being the loudest in the room, from forcing their opinions, from drowning others in noise. But the Stoics understood the opposite, that real strength often lives in silence. Your ability to remain calm, to withhold unnecessary words, unsettles people who rely on chaos to dominate. When they shout, they expect you to shout back. When they provoke, they expect you to defend, but your silence robs them of victory. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." And he was right. Silence unsettles because it forces people to sit with themselves. It is a mirror, reflecting their own insecurity, their own anger, their own emptiness. This is why your silence becomes intolerable to some. Because in a world addicted to noise, the one who does not need to shout is the one who holds the most power. But silence is not weakness, it is control. It is the ability to rule yourself in the very moment others lose themselves. And that kind of restraint exposes the fragility of those who believe dominance comes from force. So when they resent you for your silence, understand this: it is because your stillness reveals the turbulence they cannot hide. You remind them that true power is not in being heard by everyone, but in not needing to be heard at all. Chapter 8. Your standards expose their mediocrity. The moment you raise your standards, you declare something dangerous, that you will no longer settle. And this declaration unsettles everyone who still does. When you refuse to tolerate lies, you expose the liars. When you demand discipline of yourself, you reveal the laziness of others. When you protect your boundaries, you confront those who live by taking advantage. This is why people resent your standards, because they shine a spotlight on their mediocrity, and mediocrity always despises excellence. Seneca warned, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." But what happens when you refuse the company of those who drag you down? They will call you difficult. They will say you are impossible to please. They will whisper that you think you're better than everyone else. But in truth, all you've done is this: chosen not to live beneath the level of your own potential. And here lies the hidden reality. People don't resent your standards because they are high. They resent them because they know, deep down, they could have chosen the same path, but they didn't. By demanding more of yourself, you force others to face the fact that they demand nothing of themselves. And that confrontation is unbearable. So hold the line. keep your standards, because they are not just rules you live by. They are a declaration to the world that you refuse to shrink, even if others would prefer you small. Standards are not only about what you demand of others, they are first about what you demand of yourself. The world sees when you refuse to cut corners, when you show up with discipline, when you hold yourself accountable in the smallest of details. That consistency unsettles people who live by excuses. Your standards become a mirror, showing them what they could be had they chosen persistence over comfort. And while some will be inspired, others will be enraged, because your life removes their excuses. Here's the deeper truth. Every boundary you set, every discipline you uphold, is a reminder that mediocrity is always a choice. Your very existence feels like a judgment, proof in action, not words. So when resentment comes, and it will, recognize it for what it truly is. It is hatred of the uncomfortable truth that you've chosen the harder road, while they've chosen the easier one. And though they may curse you for it, deep down, they know you are the one who has chosen rightly. You don't need a louder voice, you just need a quieter center. When your confidence is calm, their insecurity has nowhere to stick. You refuse to conform, the crowd's volume loses its power. And when you succeed, their envy exposes itself, and the bitterness runs out of stories. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Stoic wisdom. Until next time, take care, stay strong, and stay stoic.